everybody. This is the Artist Focus, and today I'm facilitating. My name is Ike Trinks from Rotterdam, the Netherlands. And yeah, actually for us it is the 1st of May. And so this is a recording for you today for the 6th of May, who is tuning in. And yeah, I'm very happy today that we have here with us Julie Vulcan. So great to see you again, Julie. Thank you for joining us and that you're going to share your work with us and that we can have a conversation about it. Maybe I will first start to introduce you, and then you can tell a little bit more. So let me have I'm just going to read, of course. Julie Vulcan is an Australian artist, researcher, and writer working across performance, installation, and digital media forms. She is mainly known for her durational performances engaging a choreography of repetition. Her works have been presented internationally with I Stand In, a ritual for the forgotten, Misplaced, Unrecovered, and Removed being one of her most traveled performances. They are presented at the Spill Festival, UK 2013, Performatorium, Canada 2014, Second Venice Performance Art Week, Ritual Body, Political Body, Italy 2014, Deathfest, Australia 2016, Taking Place, Canada 2017. As a recipient of an Australian Council for the Arts Cultural Leadership Grant in 2012, Julie undertook research trips in 2013 and 2014 to visit performance artists and events in the UK, Cambodia, Italy, Germany, Sweden, and the US. On return, she found and helped facilitate the performance art practice and research platform Base Metal. Underlying many of her performance works is an interest in the veracity of mediated memory and the influences and/or motivations behind how we remember, record, and rewrite our actions, bodies, and traces. In 2020, after a bushfire swept through her home place, followed swiftly by the pandemic, Julie considered more deeply the performance of her body being performed by her surroundings rather than for an audience. In 2021, a year after the Black Summer fires, Julie temporarily transported S from her home to perform Rescript, a 4-hour ritual in honor of the loss of non-human lives and new beginnings. That we will discuss in the second part. If you want to know more about Julie's work, she has a website, www.julievulcan.net. And also, it is interesting to go to the Facebook group Base Metal. It is a private group, so you have to become a member. So Julie, so great. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ika and Karen behind the scenes. It's so great to be here. And just before we go any further, I would also just like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Gundungurra and Dharawal people. And this is the place where I work and live. And I'd like to extend my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. So,
okay. Yeah, thank you. So actually, Julie, yeah, I also like we're going first to have a look at your, we call it your series of window performances, or that's how we group them. And also like reading your bio, and there's certain aspects in your works. It's durational choreography that I find interesting to hear more about, and repetition. But also this returning interest in memory, or the, let's say, how we remember and how we recording and rewrite our actions and bodies and traces. So I'm very curious if we go through, let's begin with the slideshow, and if we can get that. and then we can maybe discuss, go through your works. So maybe you could also tell the choice of why. Maybe it would be interesting also to start with the choice of going and look into these particular works of you.
Thank you, Ika. Yeah, look, actually, this is the perfect place to start in terms of just that last question you had around memory and rewriting memory. Because I suppose just to put these first few slides into context, I need to say that they come out of this work called Undisclosed, which actually was a 2-year project. It was what I called a 2-year micro performance project, where I performed something once a month. And in the first year, which was 2008, I performed in an undisclosed location, invited no one, there was no audience, and the only document of my performance was my first-person account on the blog site. So the only way you could get a sense of what had happened was through my reading my telling of that. And then the second part of the project was disclosed, so that was 2009, and I invited one person each month to document, to be an audience member or a witness, and to document the action. But I didn't stipulate how they could document it. I gave them no direction. They were free to choose whatever form they wanted, and then they would present that to me either straight after or after in a few days. So in a way, this project was very much about like how we, I suppose, looking at the veracity of like the live and the not physical or not being there present when something is live in performance, which is a big conversation that we always have in performance art, right? But as well as that, it was also about this idea of like seeding memory. What do we need to seed memory, and does that need to be something kind of real, or meaning do we have to be present witnessing something for something to be real and to seed a memory? So that's so these next few works are actually from that series. But we are going through a little thematic around windows, so we kind of decided windows as a way of this looking out and looking in, and these kind of different engagements.
Yeah, maybe you could tell a little bit what we are looking at here, because in the first.
Oh, sorry. So this is like undisclosed number 8. I'm going to have to quickly look at my notes. I will just tell you that because I can't actually tell you what I did. I can only just show you some of the images, because that's the whole project really. It's just you engage with what you see, and then you are invited to create your own story there, I suppose. But what I can tell you and what appeared on the website would be these images. So there were like 14 images. So these are just a few, but they pretty much give you an idea of what happened. And it tells you what date the image happened, what date the performance happened, how long it was for. This was for 22 minutes, and who documented it. So these are, I think is that the second image, Karen, or is there a third image? I'm not sure.
I think this is the last one of this particular performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to go just go to the next one?
Yeah.
Go through the images, and then. Yeah. Or actually, it would be good if you can read this out loud, so everybody can listen.
So we'll see. So this one, I will read this text in a minute, but this was an intervention. Actually, I did a couple. You'll see a couple of these where I actually did interventions into existing artworks that I had up. So this particular disclosed happened within an installation that I had in a shop window, and I think towards the end of that installation, I decided to do a disclosed in it, and invited someone to come along and witness it. So they wrote a text in response to what they saw, and I will just read that so you can. I thought I had it here, but I'll have to read it off the screen, which is a bit hard. Okay. Julie stepped into the window in a red dress. She placed a bucket on the floor next to her and with a sponge began to wash herself. The water was red. She pressed the livid sponge to her face, neck, arms, and chest. Red ran down her body. The dress clung to her. A blush spread across her face. Red splattered across the white floor. People walked past, mostly not noticing. It was a Sunday afternoon in winter. Rain was brewing. I could see the men waiting at the bus stop opposite, reflected in the shop window. One of them crossed the road to peer in the window for a few minutes at Julie's melancholy, assiduous ritual. Then he returned to wait for his bus. There was something intensely private about Julie's performance. I felt she might have been anywhere, so bound up in her actions that it didn't matter if anyone saw or no one. It seemed the core of real performance, this deep focus, a form of oblivion. When she finished washing, Julie stepped out of the window, leaving 2 white footprints in a pool of red. The whole picture in that window of messages on bottles and the trace of human feet in a red stain was so beautiful. Julie then tipped the remaining red into the gutter. I followed the fluid down the street, watching it make its way past dirt and bottle tops. It dispersed before it reached the drain. By the time we had arrived at our next destination, it would have evaporated altogether.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, let's have a look at the next one, because this is like after the action, I believe so, with the bottles and the shop window. It's interesting that like a shop window is very much the idea of showing, and but it is also like there's like a border or something you cannot touch. This is not for you in a way, but you can only create a desire that what is on the other side of the window or something is what you would like to have. So I was just curious, like what I also read from the text is that for you, you're kind of with yourself, and there's the outside world doesn't matter in that moment in a way. So I'm very curious about that, because it's like a opposite of placing yourself in a showcase, because a shop window is also a showcase. So I'm very curious if you could say something about that.
Yeah, I kind of find that really interesting, this thing where, because we have this like transparent screen, it suddenly changes the way we view something. So what is the difference between me standing outside on the street doing this action or inside on this window? But then also, what is the difference of me looking or not looking at an audience if I'm outside or inside this window? So in both cases, I think I would be doing the same action and performing exactly the same. So the only thing, like you say, that has changed is that I'm behind a window. I suppose for me, it's not so much a desire, in the sense of, I don't see the windows as kind of a desire of what might be in there, and an audience maybe wanting to engage with that. But because I think in the sense of these windows, it's more for me like the question of what is happening, like walking past something and having something in there that is maybe not expected or not the usual, or these shops are in very kind of like mundane suburbs. They're kind of very, like, this particular one is as Fiona indicates, is opposite a bus stop. Most people are kind of just trundling past it. It's not anywhere in a high shopping village or anything like this. So to me, what's interesting then is these are kind of windows that people might just walk past on their way to work or to get something from the shops. They're not kind of really in a window shopping area. So then I like this idea that suddenly this window they've walked past a million times has something different going on, and what is that? And that this is the important thing of the traces, is that whether you're there and see the action or not, there's a trace suddenly there that has changed. And I think this is always what I come back to. It's like, do we need to see the action, or do we just, or how much is the action and how much is the trace? And
important, yeah.
Yeah.
We live in a world of traces.
Yeah. But we don't always notice them, and this is what I keep coming back to, I think, for me.
So should we go? And I know there's so much more to talk about the content of each work as well, and maybe we can little bit touch on that. But maybe it's good to continue with the slideshow to have a more look, and also to see the other works that are window related.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is still the same piece, right? Yeah. And it's also interesting. These are the bottles.
Yeah. So that's, I won't go into that work, but it's called Wend, and you can actually see it on my website if you want to know more about that work. But yeah. So this is the next. Yeah. Yeah. So this one again, there's two works in one here. So the first work is What You Don't Know But Can Probably Guess, and it was basically where I occupied another kind of gallery shop window in another kind of suburb, out of like an inner west suburb. It's not an area that a lot of people necessarily go out to after dark. It kind of is just much more quotidian, and I basically entered that space at dusk, and the idea was when shops closed, I started my day there, and then I finished it at dawn when the other shops are opening. And so if we could just hold there for a minute, Karen. This is one of the actions that I did over the night. I kept an archive, a time archive, and so every time there was something that might have happened, whether it was inside the shop or outside the shop, maybe it was a car or someone was arriving across the road, like when the bakers arrived at 3 a.m, I would annotate, like I would notate when they would arrive. Or I think the bottom one there, you can see cockroach runs across the floor. And yeah, so this was kind of an archive of the night, which was one of the things that I did throughout the night. And so again, it was this thing where, like, there were people that would walk past, like after 12, they'd been at a club or something, or they'd come off out from a restaurant, and they'd walk past and go, what's going on in there? And then, but equally, I got to see what happened on that street after certain hours.
Can I ask you, Julie? But if you are performing, and in this one also, and at the nighttime, and people pass by, do they try to? Because I think it is also very human that people try to communicate with somebody who. I was curious, did that happen to you? And how do you? Was that something that you also would encourage, or are you really like? Not connected at all? Like, do you engage with people?
Yeah. Okay. With this one, I did actually. I mean, not in a huge way. I would just either wave or make some kind of acknowledgement through the window if they asked that. I mean, that would happen more. It happened more around kind of the sort of midnight-ish time, because there was a restaurant a few doors up. So when people were leaving, I think they kind of came and looked and watched and tried to work out what was going on. I wasn't being so performative in those hours. I was very much more being kind of just inhabiting the space and doing things and setting up kind of installation elements and things within the space. So this image here that you see, which looks much more performative, was the final thing that I did at 5 o'clock in the morning when I did another intervention with Disclosed, and this was actually the final Disclosed. So someone came and documented that at 5, yeah, and that was much more a formal kind of, I suppose, performance within that space. Yeah.
So if you also look at the titles of your work, which are also in a way like between making visible and keep it a secret, which is also really interesting again, because you're in a kind of a semi-public place. You make it public, but you also kind of keep something secret. I'm curious about that, this tension
Yeah.
between that.
So I suppose for this one, the title being, what you know, but what you don't know, but can probably guess, was more, I don't know whether it's so much a secret. It was just more that there's always something that you don't see, but then maybe there is something you can extrapolate from what you do see and what remains. So I like that tension, and I like the tension that we're always like, because we live, our bodies are layers and layers, and layered, as well as the sites that we inhabit are layered, and my inquiry is always to kind of try and understand what makes those layers and what makes us, and
But also when I look at this one, is like it also looks very domestic. Like we
yeah,
get a view into your life, and maybe that's also something that we are always a bit different when others are around. Right? There is the person who is completely private in a way, and there is this person, you change your person a bit as soon as somebody's visiting you, or somebody's looking at you, or that maybe you're looked at. I'm just curious about that, as you say, these layers that we have, these different layers that
yeah.
makes us who we are. Does that play a role?
Yeah, I'm not. I have to think about that. I'm not really sure it's that. I mean, of course, I see what you're saying, but I don't know whether that's actually so much what I'm exploring. And in a way, I think I'm more interested just in this tension of like what we see and what we don't see, in the sense of curiosity. I think in the sense of curiosity, it's like, I think that it's very easy to just walk past, say, for example, a shop window that we walk past every day, and not pay attention to like maybe something that has shifted drastically in that shop window that wasn't there yesterday. So for me, the interesting point for me is that someone walks past that shop window on their way home at 5 o'clock in the evening, and it's an empty shop window. The next morning on their way to work, there's arrangement of things. Now, if they are curious, they would say, well, when I came home last night, they weren't there. How did they arrive? And it's so early the next morning. These are the kind of questions I ask myself. It may not happen. No one might think that way, but this is what intrigues me. It's like, how do we jolt a curiosity into the things that surround us? So I think this is more kind of what I'm interested in the sense of those layerings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next slides. Maybe we should continue a little bit also, so we have time for the second part.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just go through, and because I see here there's a difference than the first ones, because what I noticed, if you go to the next slide, that here you have people can visit you. So that's like opening your door for others to participate there with you behind the window, let's say.
Yeah. So just really quickly with this one, and I think why I chose to show this one in because I think it's a really nice extension on from the other one. This was a performance program that was initiated in this glass cube, actually inside a nightclub. So the nightclub has this glass cube, and it basically straddles the band room, which is quite a large room, and a smaller, intimate bar. And so there was a program put in there where performers could perform in this glass cube. But of course, I decided I wanted to turn that upside down, and rather than being on display, I wanted to again play with this idea of I'm watching just as much as being watched, and how I kind of allowed people to view what was inside the glass cube as much as like me viewing them. So I covered the whole glass cube with like Venetian curtains and blinds and brown paper, and there's a whole bunch of things that happened. But basically, I think that the thing of interest here is that I played with this idea of the rift or the breach. And the breach was, of course, when I did invite one person every now and then into the space. But and there was a whole bunch of things that happened around that. But for me, again, it's this window space of like how we work with this and what we reveal and what we don't, and what's the curiosity, what's the question, what's this one. I think comes back to the desire question earlier, because in that space, there was a real desire to want to come into that glass cube with me. People really wanted to come in.
Yeah, there's still one also left, which are the images of the first, let's say, the intro video we saw that was in the Rapid Pulse Performance Art Festival in Chicago. And also in this one, maybe we just go quickly through it. But what I noticed in this one also, that here I see this the interest in the traces very much back in different ways, which is a very playful way, like the lipstick traces on the textile, but also your face, like the shape of your body, of your face. It's interesting, and I would also like to go into that more, but let's maybe first continue, or would you like to say something, Julie, about this last one?
I think I just quickly, I think that this the Redress series is, again, like the Undisclosed series, is a number of works. There was 10 in the series, and they all had they all dealt with this repetitive choreography, this choreography of repetition, and that filtered over through into the materials that I used as well. So there was always salt, there was always the red dress, so that was a play on redress, and water often, and there's muslin material. So in terms of again, these ideas and these motivations for myself, this choreography of repetition is very much about time and what time allows, in terms of a kind of I suppose in a way this is a very personal work. I never really explained to people what I was doing each time, but I think it's very it's all about that kind of process of duration and repetition as kind of a transformative mode.
I also understand that redress I first confused because I'm not native English speaking, so I thought of other meaning of it, but then I realized it is something also about making good.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So
yeah.
I'm sorry, but let's continue.
No,
and maybe we can return towards the end. We maybe can address some parts of these works, but let's continue with the second part, a different kind of work, and maybe Corin can play the first short video. So, Julie, maybe you could explain where this is, and so for those who don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of preempted it in my bio that we talked about it. So now we're here.
Yeah, right.
This is a video of me walking through our home about 6 weeks after the one of the big bushfires that happened in Australia in 2019, 2020 happened. So we had one of those fires through our home. So we live on 6 acres, mainly bush. And so in Australia, we call bush the kind of the natural environment outside of the cities. So bushland would be, where there's lots of gums and understory and animals and not so kind of built up. So I live between a big national park and a big conservation park areas. So yes, this was kind of a very significant event, and it just happened just before we all went into 2 years of isolation with COVID. And that is me walking through the space, and that was 6 weeks after the fire. So you can still see how we're only just a few little buds were returning at that time.
Yeah, that's quite fast. That there is something growing again. That's quite, and also in a way, it's a beautiful image, but it is also, very disastrous. But I'm just curious, when I was looking at the video also, like, how does it feel to walk in that place, in that surrounding?
Well, I would say initially it was quite shocking and emotional. And it was mainly because it's very hard to understand what that space looked like beforehand. I mean, you can still see that there is the shapes of the big trees, but they now have no canopy, so there's no leaves. And but what is missing is the understory. So even though you see a few little branches and things of what might have been shrubs, I would never have been able to see through any of this beforehand. And so after the fire, it's kind of this sense of walking through this negative space is what I call it. It was quite, it took a lot of getting used to, but then at the same time, you immediately feel protective of it. And then we come back to our traces and layers. For me, the fire was kind of, it is what everything I've been kind of exploring in so many ways, because there I am walking along that ash, and that ash is now everything that was once my home, or the things that I shared my home with. So it's the ash of the little birds that live there. It's the ash of the plants that live there. It's, they are now part of that space, and I walk on it. So that is kind of a tragic, but also kind of you feel very kind of responsible to that space.
Mm-hmm. So, shall we watch your performance that is connected to this work? So let's see, Corin, if you can play the next. So this was your performance Rescript. No, what was Rescript is the title, right? From 2021.
Yeah.
Right. So also when I wrote your bio in there, you also mentioned about your body as being your body being performed by the surroundings. And I understood that as a development that happened in more this or into this period of the pandemic, but also the time of the bushfires, that you came to this thought, or that maybe there was a change in your practice. Could you say something more about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that a result of the fire, I mean, made me kind of living in this in my home place, surrounded by ash, and then kind of and like that doesn't go away quickly. Like it's a long year, and I would go out and find myself, like, I would walk out into this space every, as soon as I step out of my house, I'm in this place, and I would find myself doing things like, taking steps, very cautious steps to avoid big ash puddles and or any kind of tiny little blade of grass that might be popping up. And I would find myself staring at just these, like a burnt tree, for 5 minutes, or then cautiously moving around a certain way and looking at something else for 5 minutes, and it became to me obvious that actually, in a way, this place was performing me, and that my choices and the way in which I moved through this place over the next kind of year, and still do, was being directed by what was coming up, what was regrowing, or what was shifting on the ground, or what I was trying to avoid on the ground. And so then this idea then developed because we went into the pandemic and we were kind of isolated and stuck at home. So there was no performing for anyone else, but I became performed by my place. And so this is where this whole idea kind of extended from. And then I became very interested in that. And do I need an audience to perform? And do I just engage in this practice of performing with? And performing with place was the obvious extension of that. So
I wonder then also, because I haven't been living in a place like where the bush has been on fire and it is black or ashes around me. But does it mean, like, when you walk outside and you come inside, that you bring it with you, that it's everywhere, basically?
Initially, yes, and even still sometimes. So yes, initially I would just have to step outside the front door, and it starts to cling to my hands and my clothes, my feet.
So it's so visible every day, like it's really just there's just a layer of ash over every activity that you basically do, I imagine.
Yeah.
As how it makes you perform, or decides you how you will perform, in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember even, like, just washing. We had the sink near the back door, and you'd wipe the sink down every day, and then after, like, the first week, it was like, there's just no point. It just was constantly splashed with black, stain. So there's these changes in your behavior as well to accommodate this.
Yes, and so I understand. So because we just looked at the rewrite, so you did created a performance out of it in a place. I don't know if that's connected. If it's, I'm curious also, what was the context of that place where you performed, and how did you develop that performance?
Yeah. So I was invited to come into a bigger event called Requiem, and the Requiem, and it was a Requiem for the fires a year on. It was by an Australian artist, Janet Lawrence, and she invited some various artists to come into this space as part of a big project. And I was also invited in through Sydney Environment Institute that are part of the Sydney University, who also had an interest and a conversation with Janet around all the kind of post-fire, what that means to our environment and us. And the interesting thing about that space was that it is an old reservoir, like a water reservoir in Sydney. So there was, for Janet's work and the other artists' work as well as mine, there's this interesting kind of resonance, because those particular bushfires also came off the back of a 3-year drought, and where it was one of the most severe droughts I've seen, and so there's this kind of play with the water. And then with my piece too, it's the thing that I'm placing in the muslin is a block of ice, and so the water, it slowly melts into the ash piles that are being placed on the trays. And so that, of course, was a reference to the drought, the need for water, and then also the water as kind of a regeneration. So yeah, and the actual work itself was like each muslin handkerchief, like I kind of use this as an idea of there's an I don't know if it's just an English thing, but you tie a knot in your handkerchief to remember something. And so they were kind of pseudo handkerchiefs, and so the knot would tie in the ice to remember the name of either a plant or some kind of critter or animal or species that died in the fire on my home place. And there were 75 of those, because the actual fire that went through our place burnt for 75 days. So that was just kind of an honoring of that time frame. And for me it was just this kind of ritual of remembering that, but of grief, but also of continuance. So it was not necessarily just about the loss. It was very much about like it continues.
I see. So just also what I didn't tell yet is that we do have, even though it's a recording, but we have also guests here. And for those, the guests here, thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, it would be great to share them with us, because we are also slowly coming to the end. Please write them down. And in the meantime, so also, let me see. I remember also to read that you collected the ashes. Was it like over a period of time? And did you already know what you were going to do with it? Or I was also curious about that process.
Yeah, I started collecting them in the bag. There was an area where the ashes was kind of collecting in the place, and I suppose you're in the middle of all of this, and you kind of know that you're going to, things change very quickly. And I need to do something with this ash. I know I will want to do something with this ash at some point. I don't know when, I don't know what that will be at this point in time. So I started collecting a whole bunch of things after the fire, and I had something like 12 kind of big, well, those bags that you see, they're kind of rubble bags, and I had about 12 of those filled with ash that I collected from the land, and they basically sat on our veranda until this work was kind of realized, along with a bunch of other things that I kind of collected and thought at some point I will use for a work in the future, or maybe not. But these things change so quickly, so it's like, well, at least I can have those materials there.
Yes, because also I understand it's basically your backyard. You're living in it, so it is also still in its development. And what is the condition right now?
Vastly different.
Okay.
So that mid-story, that negative space I was talking about, that was kind of so shocking. We don't have that anymore. So
Wow.
the whole kind of the initial colonizing plants, like the wattle, we have these wattles here and little shrubs and things. They've all kind of grown to 2 or 3 meters now. So there's this nice little kind of low story woodland that is throughout the place, and bringing back all the little birds and things, and got a good stock of wildlife that come wandering through here. So the only thing that really is, I mean, you still see the black of the trunks of the trees, and the significant difference is we don't have the tree canopy we had. That still is taking a long time, and lost a lot of those trees, but we have a mid-story, so that's just nice.
So anybody, you're welcome to ask some questions. I see also a question coming in from Wei Sen. Thank you, Wei Sen. The question of Wei Sen, and maybe you can also read with me, Julie. What was the process you went through to uncover the names of all the flora and fauna that were burned?
Okay, so well, the process, I suppose, was having lived here before the fire. I've always been very interested in. I want to know about the place that is my home, and so that is again that kind of layering and that idea of like, I just, home is just not something that I just land in here and I go about my business. I'm really aware and conscious of like trying to understand this place. So I already knew, I'd already been kind of documenting and the species of plants and the little animals and the little birds that kind of lived here. So I was quite kind of aware of them, and I would photograph them. And so in a way, that process was kind of already there. I already had these documents of the animals and the plants that I had shared the home with.
Okay, it's also interesting, the documenting that you happen to be in a place where things get lost in a way, and that you also like, you are always in the process of documenting or maybe archiving or how to, record the things around you, and that this happened around you. It's like performance is also real life, but this is really close directly in your everyday life. It's interesting how that, your life is, maybe that's what you say, that it's the surrounding who decided how you perform.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next question, because suddenly I see a lot coming in. And here we have a question. I think it's a question, not sure yet, but Dagmar, welcome. Thank you for also sharing. In reference to undisclosed and disclosed, doesn't the image of memory, by becoming aware of it, trigger the moment of the action? And then how does it appear in the mind of the performer? And when reading the words of the person documenting in words what the action was, what did it ignite in you, Julie? Thank you so much for all the insight.
I love that. Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, yes, for sure. It's like I love these kind of again, it's these layers of memory and idea, and then what is my memory of that moment and what my doing was. But then I suppose I have a memory of like certain things about, but then when I read Fiona's text, I remember other things that maybe don't come to mind, but then are there, or they bring more present. They become more present in terms of like what was happening at that point in time. Like even the idea of the person that came and looked in the window, I remember like someone coming and looking, but I don't have this context that Fiona talks about. and then I'm interested in that, because as you say, Dagmar, it's like there's my memory, there's my remembering of my memory, and then there's the memory that that Fiona has given me of her text, and then my rereading of that memory, and then it creates this thing. And so, yeah, I mean, there's no answers here for me. It's all a question. It's all a kind of interesting process. But yeah, thank you.
I also a photograph of a performance over time seems to become so dominant in of the memory. I don't know if you have that experience too. In a way, yeah.
Yeah, although I don't know. I think sometimes personally for a performance that I have been inside, when I see photographs of those performances, they do feel kind of they are of it, but they are separate to me. Like they are these kind of like these very framed moments, and sometimes I can step inside them and go, oh, I know what I was feeling or thinking at that time, or I can feel the energy of the space. But sometimes they also kind of just feel, like you say, they've become just this, they become a particular image that's caught. So again, that is kind of an interesting question, isn't it, around these ideas of like what is memory and what they do, you know, what does this do to us? And yeah.
So I also have here a question of Corin. Let me see it. How has the practice of duration transformed your practice? And I'm wondering how this connects to the window works of layers, undisclosed or secrets. Also thinking about this concept of performing with place that came during the pandemic for you.
Okay, so I think there's a number of things there, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, just quickly, I'll answer the duration one first. I've always worked with duration. So the weird thing is that my initial background as an artist was as a video installation and sound maker, and I used to make video sound installations that were long durational video works. And initially they were, sometimes they had me in them, sometimes they didn't, but I was always really interested right from the get-go about this kind of what time, expanding time, slowing down time, having these spaces where people could come into and experience something in this very slow meditative way, how that changes not only how we feel, but also like what we see. So I think for me, this is probably foundational, and it gets transposed into the way I do performance practice. So I often joke about that. I kind of say I just kind of became a live performer and stepped out of my videos. And I don't know if that really answers the question, but and that connects to the window works of layers, undisclosed or secrets. But I think that the duration thing there is then about the repeated motives and the repeated processes. So, I mean, you will see even just with that kind of bunch of works that we showed, there's obviously obvious materials that I keep coming back to that get repeated. There's colors, there's kind of a form, and I think this interest in windows, it's about playing with these different elements that help me possibly still work inside this process of what are these layers and traces, what are these questions, what am I putting out there, what are people seeing, what are people not seeing. Again, I don't think there's any answers. It's really all process in a sense. And
our time is also running out, but we have more questions. Let me see if what to do with this. Can we still go to the next questions? Yeah, let's go to the next question. Alex, also here, welcome. I read the question. So interesting to note the shift expansion in your work from a focus on the human body and human body traces and imprints to the bodies of animals and to the land as a body whose traces you mark in Rescript. Is this continuing in your current work, research interests, or are you feeling the pull to return to your own body? Yeah, it's interesting, that observation.
Yeah, well, I think that this is exactly, it was a turning point, definitely. I think that the fire, it opened up this question for me much more succinctly and clearly about being performed by the place that I'm in, and my body being performed by place. And I think that maybe there was always a kind of an awareness and a kind of play with that in some ways, but it was maybe not so overt. And now I feel like it is, and it's really interesting for me, actually, and it is much more what I write about and explore more now, I think. So yeah, watch this space.
Mhm. In a way, also knowing you're working on your PhD, and your topic is darkness. Is it right? Am I correct? Also, there I see some link in it, but maybe it's a different thing, and we should not go into that right now, I think. But there's a couple of more questions. And Dagmar says, life is art, so close. Layers of perception. Korn is saying, Dagmar, the multiple layers and becoming aware of them in time is, I think, a response to an earlier question and your answers. And Alex has here saying, or perhaps you would dispute my account of your earlier work being focused on the human body. Perhaps this works are always situated in and amongst multiple bodies, both human and non-human. Yeah, you can see it maybe also like that. What do you think, Julie?
Yeah.
And then we have also a question from Zen. I'm interested in that art-life proposition too, which feels present to me across your practice. And I think about a life well lived being one lived with deep attention, practice well practiced. Maybe this is less of a question, but more, yeah.
Yeah, although I can quickly respond to that, because
Yeah.
I do kind of feel like there is not a lot of difference half the time. Like, I think, like, when you make work that is so much about process and questioning about how you are in life and place and where you are, there's always this practice well practiced. To practice well practiced. Thank you.
There's a whole no difference between the life and the art.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
okay, go back what Dagmar is saying. Let me see. Also, Zen is saying slow durational video. This idea of attention for me again.
Yeah.
Taking the time is significant. Yeah. Yeah.
Comments.
Yeah.
Did Jenny? I think Jenny may have had a question.
No, Jenny had to leave earlier. She says this was
Okay.
wonderful, but she had to leave.
Right.
Oh wait, I asked a question earlier if the info could be in the. Oh no, it's something more Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I think the time is running out, so we
Yes.
can just do slow motion, unfortunately, and take the time for things. Unfortunately, that is with the artist focus always a bit of a rush. Actually, what we don't want, we just want to be in the moment and enjoy the time and respond to what it is, how much time we need for things. So this is the opposite than doing a performance from dusk till dawn. So I want to thank you very much, Julie. Maybe there's one last thing that you would like to share or you want to say. Or Sorry, I put you this onto you.
Other than just a really big thank you for holding this space with me, Ika. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for taking the time to have a conversation with us, and that we, it's so lovely to reconnect after our very brief connection a few years back. But,
Yes.
yeah, and thanks again to Caron for inviting me into this space as well, and all my lovely people that turned up into the room to ask gorgeous questions and also be with me here tonight. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for showing up, and also for those viewers at home who will be watching this on the 6th of May. Thank you for tuning in. And also, before we are leaving, the next artist focus will be on the 20th of May, and this will be with Kaiki Twisselman. And I don't know if we have anything to show. I guess no, we don't have a flyer for it, so we still stay here. Well, then I guess that was it. And thank you so much, Julie. And let's stay in touch. And everybody, I would say, go to the website to learn more about the work, because we just could only show, a little bit of it as usual. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.